Chapter 1, Artifact Graveyard. Lake Rusty. Federal Special Waste Treatment Plant Number 23. Also known as the Artifact Graveyard. Growth of civilization has been fueled continuously by the powers of cultivation. Artifacts used to be out of reach back in the day, but the artifacts that could only be operated by cultivators spread to every household. They became necessary items in ordinary lives, helping them with living, traveling, studying, and working. They made the lives of people easier, but also brought forth a great deal of waste, artifact waste and metal scrap. Artifact waste usually has quite some essence energy remaining in them, easily causing radiation pollution. The glyph arrays that compose the artifacts are highly volatile, such that there is risk of explosion. If left unattended, artifact waste could cause major damage to the environment. Therefore, at the perimeter of every federal city, special waste treatment plants were installed in order to treat artifact waste. Special Waste Treatment Plant Number 23, located at the southern outskirts of the federal cultivation city Floating Spear. Underneath the hazy yellow sky, a purple polluted swamp emits a heavy stench. A mountain peak of metal shards protrudes from the swamp like the spine of a dinosaur. Fragments of flying swords lay scattered chaotically on the peak. Sitting next to the swords was a rusted crystal golem. Its vacuous eye socket showed its spirit fire had long extinguished. The only thing left was an essence-eating bug, which poked out of the skull, cautiously looking around in the artifact graveyard where danger lurks on all corners. Boom! Close by, within another mountain of trash, a discarded artifact's glyph array began to fracture. Its excess essence energy suddenly exploded and sent half the mountain flying through the air. Countless metal parts scattered in the sky like a maiden scattering flowers, spattering in all directions. The surrounding mountains were triggered into chain reactions. Looking up, all that could be seen was smoke and dust. It gave the image of a dance of demons that covered the entire sky. Here, it appeared that life was forbidden. Only insignificant cockroaches and worms could consider this a paradise. However, Li Yao dormantly lurked behind a mountain of trash. Licking his cracked lips, he wore a dirt-yellow windbreaker covered in dust that made him blend with the environment. He shot a glance at the slowly rising mushroom cloud nearby. In his clear youthful eyes, no trace of emotion could be seen, no feelings rippled out. Only when the dirt and metal shards spattered upon his refuge mountain of trash did he retreat somewhat deeper into the trash heap. At the same time, he slipped on goggles, covering half his face. It's here! When the essence watch on his wrist began to vibrate, the youth became excited and the corner of his mouth hooked into a sly grin. 3:52 and 38 seconds p.m., the daily routine garbage disposal time, also known to salvagers such as Li Yao as party time. The essence watch on his left wrist was an elite hunter model produced 3 years ago by the Cultivator Guild Zephyr Guild. He had found it within a garbage mountain and it took him no less than 2 months to repair. It had an extraordinary function besides telling time. It could record the frequency of unique vibrations. When a unique vibration propagates in the vicinity, the owner is notified. This function was intended to be used to alert hunters of the existence of powerful fiend beasts nearby. However, after being modified by Li Yao, the function was changed to alert at the arrival of garbage ships. Shortly, accompanied by an insignificant sound of buzzing, a dozen or so black dots appeared on the northern horizon. Covering the earth and concealing the sky, the smoke and dust brought upon by the explosions still had not dissipated. The dozen or so black dots were mixed within and could not be distinguished. Li Yao raised his nose. His finger brushed gently against the glyph located on the side of his goggles. Swoosh! A sheet of blood red appeared on the surface of the goggles. Under the red gaze, the garbage ships hidden by the smoke had their round silhouette rendered clearly. The Essence Watch's hunting function also allowed locking onto the unique vibrational frequency of a single garbage ship. Garbage ship No. 1327, I choose you. From when Li Yao was born until he was 10, these 10 years he stayed in the artifact graveyard. He knew every inch of dirt and every garbage ship in the sky, as if they were fingers on his hand. This garbage ship number 1327 was specifically responsible for collecting trash from Floating Spear Inner City's Upper East Side. The Upper East Side was the most luxurious of the rich districts, containing the residences of several cultivators. The artifacts they threw away were of most value. Several of the artifacts were still in good condition. They were only discarded without care by the cultivators and the rich simply because they had gone out of style, or because a new generation of artifacts had been released. From Li Yao's perspective, this was not a garbage ship. It was a treasure ship filled to the brim with gold. Swoosh! Li Yao's pair of legs rippled out power. Like a shell being shot, he madly sprinted through the mountains of trash and charged into the smoke and dust, charging towards garbage ship number 1327. The mountains of trash all around him were on the verge of collapsing. Bubbles of the dangerous poison swamp rumbled beneath his feet. Li Yao was like the most nimble monkey of the mountains and woods. Every now and then, he would apply force somewhere on a mountain of trash, moving tens of meters with every step. His movements were like the floating clouds and running waters, giving a sense of tranquility. Li Yao, you bastard! You've come to fight over food with me again. At the moment, from behind the base of a few mountains appeared a dozen or so figures. They were dressed similarly to Li Yao, except they didn't have the advanced red goggles and essence watch equipped on Li Yao. Holding metal spades and rods, these people aggressively approached. They were the same as Li Yao. They relied on Special Waste Treatment Plant number 23 for survival as garbage salvagers. Where there is profit, there is competition. A ship's discarded artifact waste may only be trash for the upper echelon cultivators, but for these people at the lowest rung, these artifacts represent hope for survival. Li Yao was the salvager that had adapted the best to the artifact graveyard. Of course, this also made him the greatest thorn in the other garbage salvager sides, a thorn in the flesh. Actually, Li Yao did not care about getting along. With a laugh, his waist suddenly emitted power and his body twisted in a strange fashion. Without warning, he turned 90 degrees, splitting away from the glaring fat youth with furrowed brows that was in front of him. He seized the opportunity to use his foot to ferociously launch off of the fat face, propelling his whole body by 30 to 40 meters. Fatty Liang, everyone's here to bring dinner to the table. It all depends on who is faster. You should lose some weight. The fat youth's face was stamped red, his nose nearly sunk into his fatty flesh. He was angry to the point of tantrum. Unable to accept this, he commanded his men to pursue and they quickly entered the smoke and dust-filled area. As an explosion had just occurred, the area was super unstable. Dozens of garbage mountains could collapse at any time, causing even the diabolical Fatty Liang's group of youths to have no other option but to slow their steps and stare blankly at Li Yao's lightning speed. Seeing this, Fatty Liang could not help but spit a mouthful of saliva. This son of AB*TCH. He really lives up to the reputation of caring about money more than his life. God, if you have eyes, may lightning strike him dead. True to those words, a mountain of garbage exploded near Li Yao. Thousands upon thousands of metal parts and broken artifacts flooded down like a torrent. It came true. Fatty Liang and the youths were flabbergasted. They were at a complete loss. However, a shriek pierced through the smoke and dust crying, "Small black, save me." A path more profound than the night sky, a black streak shot out like lightning and carved a hole in the flood of metal. It was rusted, it had a nicked edge, and it was completely black. This flying sword possessed a giant handguard that had the shape of two extending black wings. Li Yao was like a drowning man grasping tenaciously on a rice straw. He hugged the flying sword for dear life. Curling his entire body onto the black streak, he pierced into the sky. In the middle of the sky, the giant figures of a dozen or so garbage ships had already emerged. Each garbage ship was hundreds of meters long and had a round plump figure like the mythological turtle that props the earth. On top of each turtle shell was carved tens of thousands of glyphs, all densely packed together. They flickered with the light of essence in 5 vibrant colors, helping those gigantic over 10,000 tons guys resist the effects of gravity. Crash! The giant turtles opened the hatches on their bellies one after another. Out came a rain of metal parts and broken artifacts that blotted the sky, pounding relentlessly against the earth. In a moment, the essence energy within the entire field was madly disturbed and shook. A perilous situation was triggered. Even the over 10,000 tons garbage ships shook left and right in the midst of the essence energy waves. Under the violent turbulence, they had no option but to use all their strength to separate from each other, in hopes of reducing the damage. Fatty Liang's group even more so did not dare to rashly approach. They feared being caught in the turmoil. Li Yao was still riding on the black flying sword, dashing quickly through the waves of essence energy. His appearance was destitute to the extreme, but he moved nimbly just like mudfish. Naturally, he did not dare to directly face the raging waves and stormy sea head-on. Rather, he relied on over 10 years of survival experience, striving to discover areas where the tides of essence energy destructively interfered with each other and cancelled into tranquility, solely for the sake of approaching as close to the location of the dumped artifact waste as possible. The pavilion closest to the water was the first to bask in moonlight. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of dumping, the garbage ships let out a rumble like a behemoth. They changed their direction, lazily returning home. The smoke and dust gradually dissipated as well. Fatty Liang had just barely climbed into the center of massive garbage dumping. He saw right away Li Yao sitting comfortably on a newly made mountain of garbage, looking at him with a beaming smile. *T. Fatty Liang's face was shaking in anger, but his heart was a mess. Li Yao chose this garbage mountain rather cleverly. It was not the largest, and it also did not seem to have the most abundant of materials. There were still dozens of garbage mountains all around, all containing priceless discarded artifacts. As for the salvagers, there were more than just these two parties. If Fatty Liang continued to compete with Li Yao, it was possible that some of the profits may be snatched up by other fishing salvagers. The figures of other salvagers had already faintly emerged. Joyful cries could be heard from the peaks of several garbage mountains. People had discovered valuable treasure. Not to mention, Fatty Liang had heard that this loathsome kid, Li Yao, was a student of Floating Spear City's famous Crimson Nimbus Guild's second affiliated high school. The Crimson Nimbus Guild was a famous sect located in the southern part of the Federation. Their strength was tyrannical and they had numerous experts. Although Li Yao may not have learned any true techniques of masters, he was not someone who could be handled with just 3 fists and 2 legs. Otherwise, he would not have made a living battling for over 10 years in this artifact graveyard, still being perfectly healthy and spry, also seizing the nickname Vulture. But how could Fatty Liang just let it go? Where did his face go? His nose was still embedded inside his flesh. While his heart was a mess, a gale of wind swept by. Fatty Liang subconsciously grasped out his hand, and his hand felt something ice-cold. In his hand was actually a scrapped crystal processor unit the size of a fist. Li Yao laughed heartily, saying, "Fatty Liang, everyone's here to make a living. I just snatched a Starlight-class CPU from you last time. It's not like I murdered your father. Isn't it unnecessary to go this far, to be unceasing until the point of death? Here, I just found a Brave Dragon 17th CPU produced by the Viridian Dragon Guild. It's the newest model, capable of calculating over 5,000 telepathic thoughts per second. Even though it's fried, I reckon you can get $3,000 or $4,000 for it. Just take it as a sign of respect from me, Big Brother Fatty Liang. From now on we're even, what do you say?" "You?" Fatty Liang did not expect Li Yao to say something like this. He was immediately stunned and was somewhat distrusting, as he scratched the fat on his face. "Yo! Look over there. Wild Wolf's men are almost here. They don't run solo like this guy. They will absolutely digest dozens of garbage mountains completely bare. They won't leave behind a single screw for you, said Li Yao as he rapidly pointed towards the west. Fatty Leung's face changed color. He squinted his eyes for quite a while and finally made a resolution. He immediately gave Li Yao a giant thumbs up, squeezing out a sentence, "Alright kid, you've got chops. Let's go make out with the goods ASAP." A party of salvagers scattered in all directions, charging towards garbage mountains in every direction. Phew! Li Yao let out a long sigh of relief. His butt was sitting on a garbage heap and big beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. The grin on his face transformed into wailing as he suddenly got up. "Die fatty! I painstakingly found that Brave Dragon 17 processor, and it became yours for nothing. Just you wait. Do you think it is that easy to take from me, the vulture Li Yao? There will be a day where what you've eaten of mine will be spat back to me. I will take back what you took from me with interest. I will make sure it's of high interest too. I will let you know why everyone calls me the vulture who values money more than life. No, this won't do. I need to be faster. Wild Wolf's gang, those bunches of mincemeat, they're even more unreasonable than Fatty Leung." Li Yao pulled down his goggles so that it rested on his neck. Rubbing his hands together, his pair of eyes contained a gleam of light. Licking his lips, he rushed towards a newly created garbage heap. Chapter 2, Hologram Projector. 5 hours later, nightfall had descended. Morning Sun Village was located next to Special Waste Treatment Plant number 23. Although its name was pleasant sounding, Morning Sun Village was actually Floating Spear City's most dilapidated, cheapest residential rental area. A location right next to the artifact graveyard meant the climate was absolutely vile. Year-round, an acrid odor would permeate through the air. Even when the main city had blue skies and white clouds, there would be a sheet of gray overcast over here. Of Floating Spear City's 19 residential rental areas, this one had the lowest quality of life. Naturally, the rent was the lowest. No matter how cheap the rent was, not many people would want to live next to a waste treatment plant. Several residential buildings were completely empty. Due to years of wear and tear without any maintenance, both the exterior and interior were covered in cracks. Corridors were covered in cobwebs. It was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost town. And Li Yao was a long-term resident of this ghost town. He liked the quietness here. He wouldn't disturb anyone when he repaired and modded his artifacts at home. It was close to the artifact graveyard. The rent was cheap. It simply served a multitude of benefits. His home was roughly 50 square meters. There were 2 rooms, an outer one and an inner one. The outer room was for eating, drinking, and entertainment. The inner bedroom was remodeled into an artifact workshop. When one enters the house, the first eye-catching image one would see would be the hundreds of crystal processors hanging down by rope, looking like hundreds of skeletal skulls. These crystal processor units were mostly relics of several hundreds of years past, already losing their computing abilities. They were picked up by Li Yao, becoming a part of his collection. He was a crazy crystal processor fan and was super into these kinds of artifacts which were able to process a myriad of telepathic thoughts like the brains of cultivators. In this tiny living room were piles of paper books, something rarely seen in this era. The piles revealed titles such as A General Guide to Repairing Artifacts, A Beginner's Textbook on Crafting Flying Swords, An Artificer Prepares, Black Mountain Elder Devil Class Crystal Battleship Maintenance Manual, and Less Than 99 Ways to Detonate a Planet. Many were ancient texts from hundreds of years ago. They were gray and yellow as well as flaky and mushy. Surrounded by the books and crystal processors was a used and somewhat old straw mattress. This was Li Yao's table, chair, and bed. And within the artifact workshop of the inner room were piles of precious treasures that Li Yao had collected from the waste treatment plant. There were shimmering flying swords, talismans with mystical calligraphy drawn on it, and elixirs with an extremely pleasant scent. Even more artifacts were dismantled by him into their most elementary components and were absent-mindedly piled up in the corner, becoming miniature garbage mountains. At this moment, Li Yao held up a silvery white cube-shaped artifact. His eyes shined and glistened, just like a big bad wolf eyeing a small bunny. A line of saliva nearly trickled down the edge of his mouth. The long, black-winged flying sword was extending out his back, trying to take a look around like a rather curious plump snake. Surprisingly, it's the Thousand Illusion Guild's newest generation's 3D hologram projector with a market price of over 20,000 bucks. If I can repair this, I may be able to get up to 10,000 bucks for it. Small black, we've struck it big this time. Li Yao was unable to resist letting out a long whistle. The black flying sword made squeaking noises. Its two sheets of wings flew up and down, as if dancing in merriment. Unexpectedly, it displayed the same hint of greed as its owner. Li Yao's hands flared and 7 to 8 oddly shaped tools used for maintenance appeared among his fingers. Some resembled screwdrivers, some resembled tiny pliers. There were also long and thin silver needles as well as curved and hooked unnameable tools. Small black, guess a number of seconds? The black flying sword made two sneering squeaking sounds, flying in the air using its pointed end to draw out a 50. 50 seconds? You're totally underestimating me. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, becoming tranquil for 3 seconds. After opening his eyes, the greed and excitement within his eyes disappeared without a trace. Like an unmoving ancient well, all that was left was cold and clear overflowing confidence. Li Yao's pair of hands suddenly mobilized. 10 fingers turned into 10 paths of flowing light, completely enveloping the silvery white artifact. At first, if one looked closely, they could vaguely make out the courses and movements of the tips of his fingers. Soon, however, only a cloud of dazzling fluorescence could be seen. Within the fluorescence came the sound of rustling. Half a minute later, the fluorescence shook and a rustling sound faded away. Hundreds of shadows retreated back to their origin. Li Yao's pair of eyes were still set on their original position, not making the tiniest of movements. As for the silvery white artifact, the 3D hologram projector had already been dismantled by Li Yao into 425 elementary parts. 39 seconds, and done. Li Yao let out a victory cry, winking in pride at the black flying sword. Then, he began to study with full concentration. TSK, this Thousand Illusion Guild's newest model hologram projector really is something. An elaborate composition, the balance of essence is like a work of nature. The most amazing part is this master crystal chip, as it's about the size of a fingernail, but somehow over 300 glyphs were engraved on this crystal chip, all working in tandem with each other to form over 20 glyph arrays. It's simply a work of art. Li Yao's hand was holding a magnifying glass, carefully observing the extracted master crystal chip. His face was filled with intoxication like that of a pilgrim. The more he observed, the more profound his expression became. That's not right. There aren't just 300 glyphs. This master crystal chip appears to be utilizing crystal folding technology, taking 3 crystal chips and layering them atop of each other, altogether containing over 1,000 glyphs and forming over 100 three-dimensional glyph arrays. This is inconceivable. The more he studied, the more profound and deep he felt. Li Yao entered a state of complete engrossment, forgetting the passage of time, and studied meticulously for a complete 3 or so hours. He failed to completely comprehend a single glyph array. Instead, his observations caused him to become dizzy and lightheaded as his vision became black. Right now, he had at most the level of a junior artifact technician. The gulf between his level and that of a Thousand Illusion Guild Master Artificer was really too wide, far too wide. If this Master Crystal Chip had a problem, then he would have no choice but to take this 3D hologram projector and sell it as a defect. Fortunately, after using an Essence Reserve tool to inject Essence Energy, Li Yao discovered that the Essence Energy flowed smoothly in the Master Crystal Chip. The Essence circuits were clear, the glyph array was stable, and there were no anomalies. After a careful inspection, he discovered that the problem originated from a crystal conduit. An essence energy fluctuation anomaly had caused this crystal conduit to burn out. Luckily for Li Yao, this crystal conduit was a standard component and was very easy to replace. Li Yao quickly found a replacement from the inventory in his house. Closing his eyes, he recalled in silence the process of his recent dismantling. An image of a complete structural diagram surfaced in his mind. His hands mobilized automatically, a gust of wind swept, and the 3D hologram projector was assembled once more. He used the Essence Reserve tool to inject a river of essence energy. The pure white exterior faintly emitted a blue fluorescence as if it were a lustrous transparent sapphire, giving the appearance of being possessed by a living fairy. When the blue glow swept over his forehead, from the depths of Li Yao's mind, dozens of control glyphs automatically came into view. Hologram projector, power on. Li Yao thought to himself, and the control glyph in his mind flared. The blue fluorescence of the hologram projector converged into a single glyph in the shape of. The two rings spun rapidly, looking like a vortex. From the middle of the vortex, a blue beam of light was emitted into the air and solidified into a massive hologram. What appeared was the image of a middle-aged cultivator wearing an 8 trigrams Dao robe, rendered down to the finest hair, looking true to life. Behind this esteemed cultivator's back was an even larger hologram. On the hologram were interweaving red and green glyph script, numbers, and arrows, all constantly pulsing and fluctuating. The middle-aged cultivator's face was expressionless. With a voice like that of an unmoving ancient well, he said, "Up next, news in the world of finance." Today's top story is undoubtedly the Traceless Sword faction's announcement of the release of their newest flying sword propulsion glyph array, Violet Lightning. Reports say that after implementing Violet Lightning, the maximum velocity can be increased by 9%, the instantaneous destructive power can be increased by 11%, and the essence consumption can be decreased by 5%. Towards flying swords, the composite increase in performance is obvious. Receiving favorable reviews, the share price of the Traceless Sword faction is on the rise. Starting before 10 a.m., the share price approached the market limit and remained at that level till the market closure. The rest of the sword cultivation industry is feeling ripple effects from the announcement. This includes the giant Swordgate, Polar North Sword Sect, and the 22 families of schools within the Southern Sea Sword faction. The stocks are hot and on the rise up until market closure. The sword cultivation industry as a whole rose by 5.42 percentage points. On the flip side of this announcement, the defense-focused Gold Armor Sect's share price fell. Experts believe that with the announcement of the glyph array Violet Lightning, flying swords have made a revolutionary leap in technology. Modern mainstream battle armor is fundamentally unable to guard against the newest models of offensive flying swords. By market closure, Golden Armor Sect's shares had tumbled 8%. After market closure, the Golden Armor Sect called for an impromptu news conference. The Golden Armor Sect's spokesman, Elder He Yan, announced a development in the newest generation of Star Strike shields thanks to an imminent breakthrough in battle armor research and development. A prototype will be available within the year and will absolutely be able to guard and nullify all flying sword attacks. As for the grasslands region in the northern part of the Federation, the calamity known as the Black Roundworm epidemic continues to spread, already proliferating into the cultivation bases of many beast-taming sects' spirit beasts. The afflicted spirit beasts numbered over 500,000. This rarely seen disaster drove the stock prices of the beast industry continuously down. Several beast-taming sects' share prices have tumbled to a 3-year low. Now, let's turn to a famous market analyst, Taiyang Xingzi, here to comment for everyone on today's developments. Li Yao watched for a while. He confirmed that the image was stable, that the sound was clear, and that there weren't any static or streaks. The 3D was exceptional, being extremely distinct and causing one to feel immersed. The artifact should be completely repaired. After pondering a bit, he thought deeply within his mind, switched to the entertainment channel. The blue glow flashed. The middle-aged cultivator and the red-green hologram flashed and faded away. In their place was a stadium buzzing with activity. This full house stadium was filled with 100,000 people, with sounds of clamoring people rumbling through the air. Under the shining rainbow rays of light, 100,000 fired-up teenagers raised their hands up high. Together, they were cheering a name. Lu Yinshi. Lu Yinshi. Lu Yinshi. Atop the three-story main stage towered a dozen or so jutted crystals like entwining canine teeth. When the cheers of the teenagers converged to their peak, the thickest of the crystals suddenly burst. With an appearance like that of clear, cold snow, yet possessing an expression heated like lava, a young lady wearing white jumped out from the crystal. Slanted on her waist was a zither that seemed to be formed out of a stack of crystals. Her slender white hand swept across the strings, and the magical clashing sounds of metal like that of a powerful army roared out. Within my heart, I have the dream to fly proudly. The opposing shore of the celestial river is our direction. This belongs to us. Cultivate a new era. Just like with all the teenagers, Li Yao's blood also began to boil. The girl, Lu Yinshi, radiated energy all throughout the stage. She was a singer of an idol school that recently rose abruptly in the last 2 years. Immediately debuting with an ice-cold figure and an explosive performance style, she attracted a great number of adolescents. She composed the song 40 Millenniums of Cultivation that became popular in the whole nation within a short half a year. Countless teenagers were motivated by this song to walk the path of cultivation. Li Yao was also one of her fans, but for a reason different than other people's. The reason why he liked Lu Yinshi was because their past were the same. They were both orphans. Li Yao was born in Special Waste Treatment Plant number 23. For as long as he could remember, the skies were always ashy and yellow. He ate rotting meat from the garbage heaps. He drank contaminated putrid water. He relied on primal instinct as well as a little secret hidden deep in his memories, struggling to survive. Since the beginning, he suffered and endured for these 10 or so years, transforming into the artifact graveyard's most dangerous existence, the vulture. If the old man had never appeared, Li Yao probably would have become part of the garbage plant, turning into a fatty lion or a wild wolf. But one day, 6 years ago, a garbage ship had dumped the old man together with dozens of tons of garbage. Li Yao felt compassionate and dragged the scar-riddled old man back home. From then on, destiny had completely changed for him. The old man never talked about his past. Li Yao only knew for certain that he was a tremendously skilled expert artifact modder. In a short 5 years, the old man taught Li Yao all sorts of fantastic and bizarre skills for modifying artifacts. He taught Li Yao knowledge of all kinds of fundamental academic subjects. He also spent money for Li Yao to attend a private high school in the city, allowing Li Yao to blend into normal society. A year ago, one of the old man's old injuries flared up again and he passed away. He left behind for Li Yao a mysterious flying sword named Black Wing. The old man said Black Wing was a strange weapon that he tried to study for half a lifetime with no success. In the end, he left Li Yao some words. "Little Yao, this old man has been to dozens of worlds in his life. I have seen and met thousands upon thousands of expert artifact modders and master artificers. But, your natural talent is the highest I have seen. With only the hands of an insignificant mortal, you are able to maintain low-level artifacts. You really are talented. But relying only on one's natural talent is not enough. By only relying on one's talent, you will always only be capable of maintaining low-level artifacts, civilian artifacts. Promise this old man that you will properly study, fight and get accepted into a university, and become a cultivator. Only by becoming a cultivator will you then have the chance to move further along in artifact repair. Such that one day in the future you become a master artificer." When the old man had spoken these words, his pair of eyes were wide open. His eyes blossomed with radiance and were filled with boundless energy. This memory was fresh in Li Yao's mind. A master artificer. A part of the circle of cultivators, one of the most prestigious professions. He did not know whether he would end up disappointing the old man. The sword Blackwing silently accompanied his side, listening to the young lady and her volcanic performance. Its two protective wings twisted fervently, dancing along to the energetic song. After quite some time, the youth's expression became clear. The corner of his mouth once again hooked into an unperturbed smile. What am I thinking so much for? Regardless of the consequences, I just have to stake it all. Luingxi was a small orphan and she transformed into the Federation's most popular female singer. Why can't I, a small salvager, become a master artificer? The youth thought back to a time long, long ago, in a place far, far away. He remembered hearing this sentence. One should always have dreams, for what if they come true someday? Chapter 3, The Uncanny Dream. F***CK, Li Yao, no wonder everyone calls you the Traceless Hand. This 2011 model Mustang GT you modded can go from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. It's like you swapped it for a different car. It's practically a rocket. I'm ecstatic. 1 minute 59 seconds. 1 minute 59 seconds. Good heavens, am I reading this right? A new god of underground racing has been born. Promise me you won't go street racing any longer. Become an honest car mechanic, no one will look down on you. There will be a day when we will have our own Auto 4S shop. Brother Yao, I'm begging you, help me out. Soar one last time. Besides you, who else can achieve a time of 1 minute 59 seconds on this track? I owe Violent Scar 300 grand. If I don't pay him back by today, I'll die. I'll die. Doctor! Doctor! Hurry and save him. He's only 23 years old. While in the midst of producing an ear-piercing scream, Li Yao abruptly leapt up from the floor. His body was drenched in sweat. From outside the window, the rays of morning dawn illuminated all around. The hologram projector continued to chitter and chatter, broadcasting classic songs. The youth, like a puppet, was lifeless for half a minute. He was slowly shaking off the utterly realistic nightmare. This nightmare was his deepest secret. Even the old man was never told about it. Since he could first remember, he would have this same uncanny dream every few days. It was like a period from a memory, one that was impossible to forget. In this strange dream, his name was still called Li Yao, but he possessed a completely different life. He was in an utterly bizarre world, in a place that was called an Auto 4S shop, working as a car mechanic. And at night under the city of bizarre rainbow lights, he was part of the underground street racing circle as an extraordinarily skilled expert car modder and racer. The rumbling of each and every engine ignited adrenaline within the night. He soared, setting staggering records until he soared to his death. Over and over, he repeatedly died in that dream world. Even though this was an experience filled with suffering, Li Yao did not actually loathe it. Instead, he was somewhat glad. If the dream world had not given him the experience of another life, he would absolutely not be able to survive in the crisis-filled artifact graveyard until now. It did not matter if this was a strange nightmare or if this was an entangled memory from a past life, neither was important. There are various yesterdays, such as a yesterday of death. There are various todays, such as a today of life. It did not matter what kind of person yesterday's Li Yao was. Today's Li Yao is one of heaven's origin sectors, star glory federations, floating spear cities, ordinary high school student. One who will become a master artificer. He took a deep breath. He had finished tidying up his room in a simple manner and completed washing his face and rinsing his mouth. The time is just past 6 o'clock. Li Yao shouldered his school bag, carrying the 3D hologram generator, and with large strides walked out the house door. Today was Monday. Dawn was just about to break. He needed to hurry to school before 7:30. Morning Sun Village's distance to the Crimson Nimbus 2nd affiliated high school was a length of 30 miles. He could take the underground Crystal Rail's 3rd line and transfer to the 7th line to arrive at his destination. However, that would require spending $8 in rail fare. Li Yao hated spending money. He swung his long legs out, used the skill his school taught him, body art of the spirit serpent, and shot out like lightning towards the main city. At this time, the morning sun was just rising and the multicolored light of sunrise was boundless. It was a dawn that bubbled with spirit energy. From afar away, floating Spear City appeared like a giant beast waking up. Every major sect unleashed and dispersed their powers, emitting bright rainbows of radiance. Many cultivators were floating in the air. Availing the transition between night and day, they absorbed and emitted solar essence and moonlight. Their bodies spiraled and wound in the form of an 8-figured luminous diffusing glyph script. At some people's sides were immortal cranes and fire crows. Meteors were orbiting around. Grand and great powerful noises were produced. Altogether, they produced a domineering appearance. A large-scale floating airship dragged along a fiery tail, sluggishly advancing in the middle of the sky. The fiery tail interweaved with the blue sky and white clouds, becoming a net of essence. The delicate and exquisite private flying shuttles continuously needled through the mesh, emitting beautiful sounding whistles. This was precisely the Federal Cultivation City floating spears morning. Li Yao bounced and bounced like a spring stored with great energy. With every step, he leaped over 20 meters. His speed was exceedingly fast. Although his stance looked quite ugly and caused passers-by to stare, he couldn't give a damn and continued to concentrate on cultivating his art. In only half an hour, he arrived at his school. A white mist swirled above his head and on his back was a layer of pure white salt produced from sweat. He did not go directly into the school gate. His body flickered and he leapt into a destitute alley next to the school. Deep within this small alley hung a rusted store sign. On it read 5 words, Old Wong's Second-Hand Shop. Below was a row of densely packed tiny words, specializing in all sorts of second-hand artifacts, also providing artifact modding, battle armor refinement, magical beast training, glyph array maintenance, monastery ceremony, and other professional services. As if knowing that Li Yao would arrive, a window slid open to expose a big bald head. It was a shifty-eyed old fellow. "HIAA, last night I lost over $2,000 playing cards. I was just worrying about how to explain this matter to my wife, but the god of wealth dropped by right away. Little devil, what good stuff did you bring to your old grandpa this time?" The old fellow smiled sinisterly. "Save it. Even if you lost your underwear, don't think I will slash down my prices." Li Yao, with no restraint, batted down old fellow Wang's extended claw. He hesitated for a second, and even though it caused him emotional pain, he still took out and passed over his hologram projector. A large part of him wanted to hold onto the device so that he could further study the 3-layer stack-folding crystal chip technology, but when all said and done, genuine gold and silver was more important. Studying at a private high school was expensive. In order to cultivate, people must purchase essence pills and auxiliary equipment, racing to increase their killing capabilities. No matter what, at the end of the year, being poor in education and rich in martial might was also valid in leading to the road of cultivation, one that needs piles of shining white silver to complete. This really is some good stuff. It was clear that old Wang knew his stuff. Receiving the hologram projector, his eyes swept. His eyes exuded a radiance of praise. He did not test it and instead spoke, a flat price, 9,500. A warmth bubbled from the bottom of Li Yao's heart. This price was not that different from the actual second-hand market price. Old fellow Wang was once again giving Li Yao a good price. Even though this old fellow had a shifty-eyed appearance of a suspicious man, he was actually the one person, besides the old man, who treated Li Yao best. Every transaction, he would more or less add a bit to the price for Li Yao. And every few days, he would give Li Yao some work with high pay. Without old fellow Wang's assistance after the old man's death, Li Yao would very likely be unable to continue paying the expensive fees of the private high school. "I don't need that much, just 9,000 is fine. Give the 500 left over to Ms. Wang, just say you won it from cards." No need for thanks. Who told me to respect the elderly and cherish the young? I can't bear to watch you and your weary old body having to kneel and wash clothes on a washboard. Gotta catch the morning assembly. Just deposit the money in my bank account. Li Yao waved his hand and hopped away. Old Wang suddenly shouted after him, "Hold on, little devil." Li Yao stood and purposely said, "Wah, die, old fellow. You don't think 500 is too little, do you? Bah, back in the day, this old fellow was a step above top-ranking master artifact modders. In a few minutes, I could make several million. From the looks of it, in this regard, you can only make scraps? This old fellow wanted to tell you that the university exam is in 100 days. You, youngster, need to properly take it and get accepted into a good university. Do not believe that you already have the skill of artifact repair and not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The world is huge and you will realize this when you go to university. In front of a true master artificer, your current ability isn't worth a damn." Old fellow Wang fumed. Li Yao's heart once again stirred with warmth and he vigorously waved his fist. "I will absolutely get accepted into university, Grandpa Wang." Chapter 4, Fiend Blade Pang Hai. The head instructor gazed like a tiger watching its prey as Li Yao ducked his body and scuttled little by little to the closed school gate. Li Yao let out a breath and checked his watch. 7:29, just in the nick of time. Just like all the other high schools in the Federation, Crimson Nimbus has entered early into the yearly crazed university entrance exam season. An aura of murder permeated through the campus, similar to that of a battlefield. Right through the school gate entrance towered a gigantic hologram in the center. Upon it were several words. Time until the entrance exams, 99 days 18 hours 32 minutes and 57 seconds. The numbers on the hologram pulsed and changed every second. The change was small, but it brought the exam candidates a great deal of pressure. On the two sides were several lines of slogans. As long as studying has not reached the point of death, one should beat studying to death. Rising by a point means crushing 1,000 people. Crimson Nimbus second dominates the Federation. Vow to pierce through the examination or be exiled. Gain admittance into the 9 elite universities. Become a cultivator. Step onto the apex of life. A fervent and passionate march resonated through the campus. Nearly 1,000 students moved like a tide of water, rushing towards the sports field. Li Yao increased his footsteps as well, sneaking into the tide of people. As soon as they arrived at the field, the tide of people separated into 3 sections, changing into completely different groups. The first group had about 40 students. All carried a dignified appearance with handsome features appearing chiseled by nature. These were the overbearing and arrogant Heaven's Chosen. The school uniforms that covered their bodies were made from heaven silk, custom tailored, and refined by cultivators. They fluttered in the absence of wind, stirring from the rays of hidden treasures. All these contributed to give an uncommon martial appearance. These people were of the important class of students, each was a 1 out of 10,000 cultivation genius. They had the strength to shock seedlings of the 9 elite universities. The second group of people were the most numerous, numbering about 700 to 800 students. The clothes they wore were also spun from heaven silk, but they weren't custom tailored, nor did they undergo refinement from cultivators. They looked to be dull and mediocre, like the faces of 1,000 people. They were the ascending class of students, comprising mostly of the children of Floating Spear City's rich and elite families. In regards to their aptitude, their strength stemmed from using heaps of resources. The third group had 100 or so people. Their clothes were inferior school uniforms weaved from ordinary materials. The uniforms were loose and worn, large and baggy, giving a somewhat sloppy appearance. The owners of this uniforms also did not give off any special energy. This was the common class of students. Most were born as children of common worker-class families. Within the private high school Crimson Nimbus II, they were in existence like a mishmash of fish. Li Yao was quite familiar with the common class and found his position within the formation. Just when he was about to stand fixed, someone patted his shoulder. A voice sounding somewhat greasy rang out, "Little devil, you only just got here? There's probably going to be an important person coming to our school today." Li Yao did not need to look back to know that this was his best friend, Meng Jiang. Raising his eyes, he looked at the main platform. Sure enough, he discovered that there was the headmaster, vice principal, and disciplinary director among the people on the stage. All of the high-ranking people were present. This was indeed a special occasion never seen on a typical morning. Which important person could be so tremendous? Even Baldi Zhao has personally appeared to greet him. To be exact, Baldi Zhao was Crimson Nimbus II's headmaster, Zhao Shud. He was the very serious and solemn core member of the Crimson Nimbus Guild. His refinement stage was that of a high-level cultivator. However, rumors claimed that when he was young, he suffered an internal injury while cultivating in the Fiend Beast Wasteland to the northwest. Year-round, he would remain behind closed doors training, rarely coming out personally to supervise school affairs. "It's Peng Hai. Man, it's Fiend Blade Peng Hai." Meng Jiang's excitement was maxed out. His voice was completely shaking. This one name had also caused Li Yao's heartbeat to speed up its tempo in a flash. Fiend Blade Peng Hai was Crimson Nimbus II's largest alumni legend in several hundred years. He was born in the slums. Since childhood, he'd exhibited a dazzling gift for cultivation. When he was 11, he was specially recruited by Crimson Nimbus II. By 12, his spirit actualization quotient reached 100% and he awakened to a spirit root of the highest quality, stepping onto the road of cultivation. At age 13, he was accepted to the 9 elite universities, Grand Desolate War Institution. By the time he graduated at age 15, he had already stepped into the 10th rank of the refinement stage, becoming the Federation's Star of Hope. From after his time in the Grand Desolate War Institution, he rejected high salary offers from over a dozen cultivator sects, resolutely deciding to join the Federal Army. In the Fiend Beast Wasteland, he fought against millions of fiend beasts in order to defend the Federation's youth and blood, creating a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood from the fiend beasts, amassing the fierce and impressive name Fiend Blade. Finally, at age 22, he became the Federation's youngest ever cultivator to reach the Foundation stage. After retiring from the army, Peng Hai returned to his hometown. With an astronomical sign-up bonus as a condition, he joined the Crimson Nimbus Guild. In a short 3 years' time, he had already become the business manager of Crimson Nimbus Guild's new Crimson Nimbus Transporter Group department, responsible for creating new transportation routes in dangerous areas where fiend beasts ran rampant. Aside from his outstanding salary, it is said he also possessed a large share of stocks in the Crimson Nimbus Transporter Group, receiving mountains of gold and silver yearly just from dividends. Did you hear the rumor? Peng Hai was just at the border of the silver-white beach. He bought an unparalleled unequaled seaside villa. It's said to be worth 70 to 80 million. Tabloid reporters say he often brings dozens of women back to his villa for open parties. Meng Jiang drooled as he spoke, unable to conceal his jealous and envious thoughts. From being a penniless kid in the slums to becoming a great faction's upper-level manager. Having a net worth over 100 million, exotic cars and beauties, and a seaside mansion, this was simply the dream of all slum kids. Li Yao and Meng Jiang were also no exceptions. They all thirsted to become the next Peng Hai. He's here. Li Yao's wristwatch vibrated lightly, indicating that something was arriving at high speeds through the air. He raised his eyes to look towards the eastern horizon. A black stream of lightning shot over, its speed was extremely fast. A second ago, it was at the horizon. With a single blink skill, it was already silently floating in the sky over the field. It was a black flying shuttle. The body of this flying shuttle was sleek and narrow like a stretched drop of water. Its length was nearly twice as long as that of common flying shuttles. Its exterior was crystal clear and no seams or rivets could be seen, it was of the highest quality. It was hard to tell from the exterior what kind of offensive magical devices this flying shuttle was equipped with. However, hidden under the radiance of its black glow was actually a dangerous air that caused the pulses of people to stop. It was a killing intent that seemed to reject being restricted to the confines of space and caused the thousands of high school students to simultaneously feel stifled. It's the Battle Shuttle Mystic Bird, the Federation's most advanced military shuttle. Its battle strength may be greater than that of a peak Foundation stage cultivator. When piloting the Battle Shuttle Mystic Bird, even the Fiend Beast Wasteland can be crossed unhindered, without restraint. Li Yao called out wildly from within his heart. As Li Yao was an artifact fanatic, it went without say that the Battle Shuttle Mystic Bird elicited great admiration, greater than that towards Panhai himself. More importantly, he knew that the barest configuration of the Battle Shuttle Mystic Bird would reach a market price of nearly 100 million. Even ordinarily rich and powerful families absolutely could not afford it. A second passed. The pits of thousands of students' stomachs loosened. They were able to resume their breaths. The Battle Shuttle Mystic Bird that was once in the air had already faded out of sight. Left behind was only a pair of pupils, pitch black to the abyss. There was still a radiance within them. Every now and then, they would flit around, reminiscent of lightning, like a fiend blade. Whomever his gaze reached was affected. Even Second's headmaster Zhao Shud and the usually fiendish disciplinary director were unable to bear it, shuffling faintly sideways. They did not dare to meet his gaze. Cultivators really are wealthy. They really are awe-inspiring. They really are domineering. Li Yao mumbled, swallowing some saliva. Rumor has it that the school specifically invited Peng Hai back to coach the important class of students. Little devil, hey, did you know that our Crimson Nimbus Second was a century-famous school, but the examination scores for the past few years were not too remarkable. There were not many students who were accepted to the 9 elite universities. As such, the Crimson Nimbus Guild's reputation has not been so hot, so this time, they specifically invited Peng Hai to come back to do some specialized training in hopes of reversing this decline in fortune and once more give birth to glory. Mang Zhang's voice was permeated full of jealousy. After all, only the important class of students were fortunate enough to enjoy being personally taught by Fiend Blade Peng Hai. There was no chance for them, the common class of destitute youths. Li Yao heard the news and he inwardly sighed a breath as well. The 9 elite universities had the Federation's most profound inner knowledge. They were abundant in resources, and these 9 institutions had the greatest number of high-level experts. Out of the myriad of schools in the Federation, this was the ultimate dream. Ordinary universities did not necessarily place fostering cultivators as their primary objective. Even if a student had high natural talent, no matter how hard they tried, no matter what multitude of good fortune they encountered, the probability of becoming a cultivator did not exceed 1 in 10,000. However, the 9 elite universities had the backing of numerous cultivator sections. They specialized in fostering cultivators as their objective. As long as one gains acceptance to the 9 elite universities, one would have a 30% chance of becoming a cultivator, stepping onto the apex of life. Becoming a master artificer requires that one must first become a cultivator. And to become a cultivator, one must first pass the university entrance exam for the 9 elite universities. Li Yao always regarded this as his objective to strive for, but from beginning to end, his innate talent was at a disadvantage, incapable of being redeemed. The distance to his dream appeared to grow further and further. With these worries on his mind, Li Yao's enthusiasm somewhat waned, even causing him to not hear what was being said on stage. The time of a cultivator was valuable. Fiend Blade Peng Hai did not speak for too long and Headmaster Zhao should soon announce the end of the morning assembly. Peng Hai was escorted by the arrogant heaven's chosen youths of the important class and left. And so, the ascending and common class of students also had their enthusiasm disperse as they walked in 2s and 3s towards the school building. And with that, today's studies have officially begun. Chapter 5, Exam Simulation. As students were currently cramming for the college entrance exams, any courses that should have been taken had already been completed long ago. These last 100 days were primarily for filling up gaps and taking all sorts of tests. On a certain morning of each week was a very important exam simulation. Under the urging of the impatient teachers, Li Yao took a deep breath and stepped into the examination chamber tagged with his student number. The chamber door sealed shut and the entire world became deathly silent. Even though I didn't receive personal tips from Peng Hai, I still need to test into the 9 elite universities. If I give my all, what do I have to fear? Li Yao clenched his fist resolutely. Beep. 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 On an interface of the examination chamber appeared a hologram, upon which a number ticked. At the moment, it was counting down. Upon hitting 0, an emotionless voice, like an ancient well, rang out. The examination has begun. Prepare yourself, student. In response, thousands upon thousands of arcane glyphs carved onto the inner face of the examination chamber flared simultaneously. Li Yao only saw the scene in front of his eyes blossom with the turning and flying of stars, having already appeared in the middle of a red-brown wasteland. The ground was roasting hot and his feet had the sensation of pins and needles. The air was thick to the point of almost congealing. It was like having a wet towel wrapped around one's body that could not be shaken off. Occasionally, a hot gust of wind would blow by, carrying with it the strong odor of mishmashed blood. From all directions came faint ghostly wails and wolfish howls. It was vivid to the 5 senses, as if one was truly standing in this world, placed in this murderous field of malevolent spirits. Nevertheless, Li Yao knew that this was the great illusionary land metamorphosed by the examination chamber. Time was of the essence. He composed himself and sped forward, following the directions of a translucent arrow symbol in the sky. The 50-kilometer long-distance cross-country run. It was one of the Federation's basic courses designed for the purpose of distinguishing the elites from the rest of the youths, in hopes that they would one day become cultivators. The path was filled with danger and chock full of traps. Sure enough, when Li Yao passed through a faintly bulging mound of dirt, the mound of dirt burst, shooting out countless rock fragments. In the midst of the rock fragments was a pair of dirt-yellow sandwolves. This species of demon-fiend beast was larger than ordinary feral wolves by a factor. Their spines bulged high and on top grew an abnormality, a small head. It was a mutated form of the low-ranking demon-fiend beast, Sand Wolf. Besides having the advantage of camouflage within the sand dunes, they also possessed a high level of intelligence. It was an extremely troublesome opponent for a high school student. But for Li Yao, who had survived in the magical equipment artifact graveyard for 18 years as the Vulture, observing every inch of his surroundings had long already become instinctive. The camouflage of the 2 sandwolves was rather sloppy, and he had seen through them early on. Dire bear stance. Without hesitation, the 2 sandwolves pounced into the air. Li Yao's pair of legs launched, his body curled into a ball, and his shoulders sank. His appearance was like a berserk dire bear as he fiercely rammed across. The timing he chose was impeccable. It was when the pair of wolves' flight had reached their apex. The wolves' power had all been exhausted with nowhere to borrow strength and, furthermore, were incapable of changing directions. They were hit head-on by Li Yao. Snap! The pair of sandwolves were sinisterly cunning, but their bodies were fragile, designed primarily for ambushing unsuspecting enemies, not fighting an opponent head-on. In a single exchange, their spines were snapped by Li Yao's dire bear stance. They bounced back towards their sandpit. Li Yao sneered and slithered forward. He extended his claws like a blade's edge, firmly grabbing the small heads on the sandwolves' backs. Steel Hawk's Claw. The wolf heads disintegrated in a flash. The pair of sandwolves let out a blood-curdling scream and died. From the void rang a sweet ding-ding sound. It was the examination chamber calculating Li Yao's score for his kills. Li Yao felt delighted in his heart. The set of skills he used in succession originated from the basic martial art 13 forces of the war beasts. At minimum, he would gain 10 points for himself. He did not hurry on impatiently but rather dragged the corpses of the 2 sand wolves out from the sandpit. In his perimeter, he found a rock that was quite sharp, and with it, he cut open the bellies of the demonic beasts. Not long after, for ribs were wet into 4 bone blades, and with difficulty, the wolf pelts were sewn into a water sack which was then filled with wolf blood. A sack of wolf blood can save one's life in this broiling wasteland. After reorganizing, resting, strategizing, and completely arming himself, Liao continued to advance forward. Not even an hour later, he had already shouldered a black crisis, killing 4 low-ranking demon fiend beasts. Although the examination had just begun, this was still nothing more than a warm-up. The following rounds were the ones that caused every Federation test-taker to encounter so much pain that they'd wish they were dead. In the midst of the sky, green glyph characters showered down like a torrential storm, forming into a quiz. Xiao Ming is a cultivator of the refinement stage. His body had formed 52,500 crystals worth of spiritual energy essence. Once, when he was cultivating, he accidentally was hit with a strange, heart-devouring bug. Every second, 48 crystals of spiritual energy essence were gobbled. Xiao Ming's master discovered his condition 1 minute 13 sec 5 minutes later. In order to save him, he passed 55 crystals of spiritual soul energy per second into his body. In addition, after 2 minutes, he increased his rate to 59 crystals of spiritual soul energy per second. Question 1. How much time does Xiao Ming need to restore his spiritual energy essence to his original level? 2. Please summarize the method for refining the heart-devouring bug. Also provide the steps for treating the symptoms after being afflicted by the heart-devouring bug. 3. Please state which sect guild first succeeded in refining the heart-devouring bug. List at least 5 major leaders of this sect guild. Furthermore, outline the root cause of the destruction of this sect. Liao lightly slapped his cheeks. He never thought that such a highly troublesome comprehensive question would come up, mixing mathematics, history, and medicine. The knowledge of warzone medic studies and other numerous subjects were needed. This exam simulation was worthy of being called a complete simulation. Attention wrapped in without disturbing the air, he pondered deeply and carefully. Within his mind appeared countless knowledge accrued from calmer times. Liao concentrated his attention and responded at lightning speeds. He overcame one question after another. At a rapid speed, a light blue answer appeared underneath the green problem as he spoke telepathically. The answer was completed. On to the next question. A cultivator on the right path of the Spirit Mountain Guild steps his foot onto a flying sword. He flies from the east towards a ravine at a speed of 247 meters per second. And another cultivator on the depraved path of the Blood Murder Stronghold treads his foot onto a black cloud. He flies from the west in the opposite direction at 239 meters per second. Currently, the 2 people are separated by a distance of 122.5 kilometers. The question is, how much time later will it take for them to meet? Suppose the cultivation of these 2 are equivalent and that they employ equivalent fundamental techniques and artifacts of their various sections. Please link the characteristics of the Spirit Mountain sect to the Blood Murder Stronghold and deduce the course of battle between these 2, at least deduce 7 exchanges. The number of words may not exceed 500. This problem was clearly much simpler than the previous. But right when Liao was about to answer the problem, the assailing odor of demon fiend beasts permeated from ahead. Impatient, low-sounding roars came closer and closer. In the midst of this terror, he calculated, answering the question. The test-taker's stamina, martial skill, willpower, calculation abilities, and the strength of quick thinking were tested. All these capabilities are synergized into an individual that surpasses the ordinary. Only then could one distinguish himself in the Federation's university entrance exams, stepping onto the road of cultivators. Liao's pair of hands crossed as he pulled out 2 ghastly white bone blades. He licked his lips and welcomed the front of him as countless thoughts boiled ceaselessly in his brain, calculating at high speeds. There was an absolute silence in the large campus. Every classroom was set up with 90 examination chamber units. In the great illusionary land, each and every third-year student was frantically striving and struggling, disposing of the heads of demonic beasts and exam questions. Imperceivable to the test takers, over 4 hours had already passed within the great illusionary land. The examination was heading towards its conclusion. Li Yao's entire body was covered in 70 to 80 cuts of all sizes. Several areas had bled dry. Of greater concern was his abdomen, which had been pierced by the fang of a demon fiend beast. He did not dare to pull it out. The bone blades he held in his hands were practically ground into sticks. Only his pair of bright, crystal moon eyes remained unbroken. They retained their clarity, hardly concealing the radiance that was bubbling up. This should be the final problem. At this moment, the fluorescence of an 8-figured rune character appeared in the sky, glistening with golden rays of light. Li Yao relied on his abundant test-taking experience to make the judgment. This was the final great problem worth 100 points, the summary question. As expected, the question wasn't long, but each word was supreme. Please summarize the Great Dark Age.